Everybody, Mike Hoenerhoff filling in for Joe Conkley here. This week we are going to talk about truss rods. The truss rod is a very important part of your guitar, and it's something that you can adjust yourself. A lot of people are afraid to adjust their truss rod on their guitar, but it's a simple thing to do, and I'm going to teach you how today. And we're also going to talk about truss rods. We're going to talk about the anatomy of truss rods and different types of truss rods. One thing to mention is this guitar I have here, when you have a truss rod that no longer works anymore, and you have a guitar where it's not necessarily worth it to do a refret or other drastic measures that are necessary to fix the broken truss rod, like remove the fingerboard, remove the truss rod entirely, we'll do what we call a heat press. And we got this bar that heats up here, and we can bend some back bow into the neck and take some of that pressure off the truss rod and often get a little bit more action out of it afterwards. It's not a place where you want to be, so take care of your truss rod and adjust it properly, and hopefully you won't be here. So, truss rod anatomy. First thing I have here is this is a typical Gibson style compression rod. This is the truss rod that Gibson has used in every guitar it's made for, almost every guitar it's made. For a little while it did use some funky double action rods and stuff, but for the most part, I'd say probably 99% of Gibson guitars that have a truss rod have this truss rod in here. And what we have is an anchor on this end. This is typically welded together so that this is has something to pull on. It'll be a channel cut in the neck and then a small slot right here for this to sit in. And then on this end, just a nut and a washer that pushes and it compresses the back of the neck. So the way that works is, it's a piece of foam I have here. You can imagine if I apply pressure in the middle of this piece of foam like this, it doesn't really do anything, right? It just kind of squishes. But if I apply pressure on the bottom, we get a bow, like so. And that's basically how this truss rod works. The reason why it works is it's centered below the mass of the neck. And it's also put in a curved channel as well. Usually the channel that's cut in is curved. So the truss rod is sitting in here like this, it's curved. So when that tension gets put on that rod, not only does that rod want to straighten out, but it also pushes on the back of the neck and makes the neck want a back bow. That whole thing puts back bow in the neck. And that's the whole point with the truss rod, is to counter string tension. I should say that's the original point of a truss rod, was to counter string tension. Nowadays, with double action truss rods, it's also to fix weirdnesses that happen in necks that aren't constructed so great. So other types of truss rods I have here, I have a Rickenbacker Truss Rod here. This one's actually trashed and the anchor's broken off, but that's what they look like. This is one that's like a Rickenbacker style truss rod. So you see we have this anchor here. Usually have two truss rods in a Rickenbacker, so there'd be two of these side by side in here. And what we get is, when you tighten this nut, it puts pressure on this anchor right here, and that forces this piece to bow up. And again, that gives us our back bow that we're looking for to counteract string tension. This is a similar style rod. I don't know what this is from. This one's kind of funky, but it's same kind of a thing. You can get a really good idea with this one. So you can see the neck gets tight, pushes that other rod up, which is going to cause the neck to bend back. This is a Martin style truss rod. I think this is a pretty short one. This is probably for like a 12 fret. Similar situation. Instead of a single anchor right here that this pushes against, this washer actually pushes against this whole channel, and it causes the whole channel to bend. And this is actually a pretty good design for a truss rod. Martin's used this a lot, so you can really get an idea. It's nice. It gives a real smooth curve. This is a good truss rod. It works well. Martin didn't actually put any any truss rods in their guitars until I think 84? 85. So anything like 84 and earlier doesn't have a truss rod. So, sometimes when we have Martins that are older, but they're, maybe they're kind of trashed and they're not, there's a lot wrong with them and they're not really worth it to do a refret. Customer doesn't want to do a refret. We will do heat presses on older Martins. It's not the preferred thing to do, but sometimes it is appropriate. So, and this is just another, actually no, this is a different truss rod. So that covers single action truss rods. And then you get into what we call double action truss rods. So single action truss rod only bends the neck in one direction. It only introduces back bow. When you get into a double action rod, that'll go both ways. It'll give you up bow and it'll give you back bow. And for a long time, a double action rod was sort of considered a mark of a low quality instrument, because the reason that they started using them was because they were making all these guitars out of wood that maybe wasn't very stable, wasn't seasoned well, and so you'd have all these weird neck warps and stuff like that. Sometimes necks would back bow without any tension on the rod, so you need a way to pull them upwards. And so the way this works is actually pretty similar to this Rickenbacker design, but the nut is actually anchored in such a way that it pushes and pulls on this anchor that goes around the threads. So if we crank this in one direction, we get our back bow, and if we crank it in the other direction, we get our up bow. In modern, a lot of quality guitar makers have switched to a double action rod, so it's not necessarily a mark of a inexpensive guitar anymore, but they are quite common, especially in import guitars. You see them like crazy. This actually is a Sumac Hot Rod, and this is another type of double action rod. It works a little bit differently. It has these brass blocks on the end that are threaded such that when you turn it in one direction, pushes the one rod up, and when you turn it in the other direction, which is kind of hard to do, pushes the other rod down. This is a pretty good double action rod. A lot of people will use these. A lot of makers these days are using this rod, and it seems to be a bit more reliable than a lot of other single action or double action rather truss rods that we see. It's machined well. So, and with any double action rod, the one thing that's concerning is when you get them in the middle, where there's no tension either way. They're noisy. They'll vibrate. They'll make noise. That's why you see a lot of them that are taped like this. This tape has come off here. This came out of something. I don't know what we pulled this out of, but so you want to use one that's taped, or Sumac I think recommends putting this in with like some silicone caulking around it to dampen it, so you don't get that clacking noise when it's loose, when there's no tension on it. So in terms of adjusting a truss rod, the main thing that you want to consider, a couple things. You don't need to be afraid to turn a truss rod, as long as you don't force it. You probably won't do any damage. You probably won't be breaking it. This is a guild, so this should have a, well, I don't know. Let's see what kind of truss rod this guy has. This is a USA made guild. So it probably has a single action. Yeah, it's just got a single action compression style rod. This is Taylor uses this sort of rod as well. Like I said before, a Gibson. So this is basically this style rod where you've got an anchor down here, and we're just pushing the rod and we're compressing the back of the neck to create the back bow. First thing, make sure you're using the right size wrench. A lot of import guitars, they'll have metric nuts or hex nuts, and a lot of times a metric or an English can fit pretty closely to the other size, but it's not an exact fit. So if you don't have a nice tight fit, the odds of you rounding out the truss nut is great. You don't want to do that. So first thing, you don't need a straight edge or anything like that to check the relief of the neck. If you fret the guitar at the first fret here, and then you fret the guitar where the neck meets the body, and then we're just going to tap right here. You know, I'm looking at this one. That needs to be tightened. You want to check the relief on both sides of the neck. You don't want to just check the bass side because it can be different, and you need to take that into account. So the first thing I do when I go to adjust the truss rod is you want to loosen it first, because if the nut is frozen on there, you know, you don't want to be cranking against a nut that's not going to move. You want to break it loose beforehand. So I'll loosen it up a bit first, and this one's quite loose, so it just moves quite easily, so it's good. And then I'm going to give it a couple little eighth turns, and I'm going to check it. That looks a little bit better, still not exactly where it needs to be. And like I said before, as long as you're not forcing it, you're probably not going to do any damage. And that's actually a little too far, a little too flat. I'm going to split the difference. Yeah, that's about good. You know, I have different sort of specs for different types of instruments, you know, usually and different playing styles and different strings. You know, typically on an acoustic guitar, you're looking for anywhere between, you know, 8 to 15 thousandths of 15 is actually kind of a lot. That's like your bluegrass guy who's like really wailing, really digging in. Electric guitar, you know, you might go as flat as like 5 thousandths of relief for a guy that can handle that sort of playing. Other thing about truss rods is if you have a single action rod like this one, you do want to lubricate the truss rod nut periodically. That's going to keep it, you know, moving nicely. It's going to keep, you know, a lot of times you can get oxidation and corrosion happening between the threads, and that'll freeze a nut in place. And if you lubricate the truss rod nut once in a while, you know, not a ton, every year or two, that can prevent that from happening. So I'm going to take this nut off of here. See the flood of internet comments about how I'm removing a truss rod nut without taking the tension off the strings, and everyone's gonna freak out. But it's okay, trust me, it's gonna be fun. So a couple different things that we use around here to lubricate a truss rod nut, you know, depending on the type of nut. This is actually bowstring wax. I guess bow hunters use this to wax the strings of their bow. And you know, put a dot of this in there. It's just a little bit thicker than Vaseline, so I think it's really kind of like has a little bit more staying power. It really fills the space between the threads nicely. It really works good. I also use Vaseline. I have some Vaseline here. This is also another thing that we use sometimes. This Tri-Flow. I think this is like just a general lubricant, and but this is what I usually go to most. And I'll just take like a little blob of it like this, and I'll just put it in the hole there. Maybe I'll take a thing I can't find, like this guy right here. And I'll just kind of push it into the threads, move it around in there, so it's just coated all the threads on the inside. And you can really feel a difference between the nut when it's properly lubricated and when it's not. If it's not, it'll be real sticky. It'll make noise when you turn it. You don't want it to go like, you know, that's something you hear a lot on a truss rod nut that's got corrosion or oxidation in the threads, and it's not, you know, working well. So usually a bunch of this will squeeze out the end. I'll just take that off there. Yeah, and you can see that the rod turns so much easier now. I turned it till the tension felt about the same, and it's a lot straighter than it was. So if you have a truss rod where you're not getting everything you need out of it to get the neck set where you need it to be, you can sometimes take the truss rod not off and lubricate it and put it back on. It'll give you a little bit more action on the truss rod. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So that's about it on truss rods. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You know, people are pretty opinionated on how to adjust the truss rod. A lot of people say that you need to loosen the tension on the strings before you adjust the truss rod. And I'll cast my vote in to say that is wrong. That's not true. If that were true, then every setup we did would take twice as long as it does. You know, don't be afraid to adjust your truss rod. You know, it's a real basic thing that every guitar player should know how to do. It's, you know, most guitars are going to need that seasonal adjustment. You know, you've got this. Most guitars are built where you have a real dense, oily, tropical wood on top, like ebony or rosewood, that doesn't really fluctuate so much with humidity. And then on the back, maybe you've got maple, you know, which is a deciduous northern tree here, and it gets a lot of flex with it in the winter. So in the winter, that maple's going to shrink, but the fingerboard's not really going to do anything. It's going to pull your neck into back bow, and usually you need to do a truss rod adjustment twice a year. So it's typically something that we just do for free at the counter. You know, someone brings in a guitar and it needs a quick adjustment, and we'll just do it and send you on your way. But
make sure you ask for Mike.
Make sure you ask for me if you need that free truss rod adjustment. And but it's something that everyone should be able to do themselves. Don't be afraid, and that's about it. So like us, share us. Joe Conkley hopefully will be back next time, and we're looking forward to seeing him back. And thanks.